Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here again with Bernie Goldberg for another episode of the No BS Zone. How's it going today, Bernie?
Well, after watching the debate, I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest with you. My,
Hey,
my big, my biggest challenge today, and I'm serious about this, is to not use four-letter words. I'm really worked up over this.
all righty. Well, today, as Bernie already kind of let the cat out of the bag, we're going to talk about last night's presidential debate. It was the
Hold,
first
hold
one.
on, hold,
Uh,
hold on, hold on, John.
sure.
If you get the cat out of the bag, be careful because some immigrant will want to eat the cat.
That's right. That's right. No, yeah,
Very,
no pun intended on that. No pun intended. But this was the first debate between Trump and Harris. Actually, their first meeting, which kind of surprised me. Lots of things to talk about, including specific exchanges and the job done by the moderators. But Bernie, you sort of have already got into this. Do you think real headway was made last night on the key issue of Haitian migrants eating people's dogs and cats?
Stop. Just stop right now. Let me start out by stating the obvious, and sometimes it's important to state the obvious. Donald Trump got his ass kicked last night. I mean, she mopped the floor with him. She stole his lunch money, whatever old cliche you want to use. She kicked his ass. And if you want Donald Trump to win the presidency, you should be very angry today. You should be very angry right now. And not at Kamala Harris, not at the moderators, though we'll get to them shortly. You should be angry at Donald Trump. He came into this debate unprepared, unhinged, unfocused. I think he has a screw loose, but we'll get into that also a little later. And he just didn't know what he was talking about. He lost the debate at least as much as she won the debate, if you know what I mean by that. As for Kamala Harris, she lied. She spouted rehearsed answers. She deflected questions to go to talking points. And as I say, despite all that, she kicked his ass. That is the headline from last night's debate.
No, it's funny when the debate started, I didn't think that was going to be the case. I actually thought she looked and sounded pretty nervous. She was asked point blank, I believe it was the first question, if the country is better off today than it was 4 years ago, and she wouldn't answer it. She instead fell back on some canned talking points, which I thought was kind of ridiculous because that question really should, if people think about it, it really should be a slam dunk. 4 years ago today, our country was going through a very hard time with the pandemic. Hospitals were overwhelmed, lots of people were sick and dying, the economy was a mess, schools were still closed. Trump was not navigating the country through it very effectively, and that's something she could have easily pivoted to, but she didn't. She flubbed that, but she did become, more relaxed. She scored, I think, some real points pretty early with the abortion issue, and once she started baiting Trump, I think it started with that crack about how people were bored at his rallies and started going home. He just self-destructed, and he kept taking the bait over and over again, right up until the closing statements at the end. That's sort of how you saw it too, Brady.
Well, speaking about goading, I can't start the day without reading the Wall Street Journal op-ed page. Yes, it's conservative. It's also intelligent and open-minded. So you just talked about how she goaded him. I'm going to read, this is one of several things I'm going to read from the Wall Street Journal overnight editorial. She won the debate because she came in with a strategy to taunt and goad Mr. Trump into diving down rabbit holes of personal grievance and vanity that left her policies and history largely untouched. He always takes the bait, and Ms. Harris set the trap, so we spent much of the debate talking about the past or about Joe Biden or about immigrants eating pets, but not how he'd improve the lives of Americans in the next 4 years. She played him like a fiddle, and he went for it. I mean, it's really embarrassing how easy it was to get under his skin. I mentioned that because you brought up goading him. Let me go to another issue now. Who were the candidates trying to win over? Anyone who was on Trump's side before the debate, despite his disastrous performance last night, are still going to vote for Donald Trump. And anybody who was on Kamala Harris' side are going to vote for her. That leaves the 10% or whatever the actual number is that are still undecided and up for grabs, if that's the case, that they were really undecided. For them, inflation is an issue today, just as it was before the debate. They still care about the border. They still care about crime. But I'm guessing Trump's personality flaws, he came up as angry last night, his angry persona. I think, and I'm wondering what you think, John, I think that will count more to them than inflation and the border and all the other issues that Trump leads Kamala Harris in every single poll. He beats her on most issues except for abortion on almost every single poll. But I don't think that's going to matter. I think his performance last night was so troubling that voters who are undecided will say, I still care about inflation. I still care about those prices at the grocery store. Yeah, I still care about the border and crime. But boy, I can't vote for this guy. I'm going to say we shall see, but if you've got an opinion, I'm all ears.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up two good points there for sure. Harris, I think, very clearly was tailoring her message to moderate, persuadable voters. Whenever Trump started talking, on the other hand, he really seemed to be speaking to the right-wing online cable news bubble crowd. It wasn't just the migrant pet eaters, but he also was name dropping Fox News hosts to validate some of his views. He was carrying on about Viktor Orban, the prime minister of Hungary. Orban has this fringe right-wing following here in the United States. Most Americans have no idea who that is, had no idea what he was talking about.
Right.
And then the angry part about his anger, I think, is a big deal too. There was this stark difference in body language between the two. Trump, as you said, he had this anger. Even when he wasn't talking, he was just kind of sitting there stewing, always looking forward at the moderators. Harris was very often looking at Trump, and when he spoke, she would smirk and sort of react with confusion, kind of smile, sort of illustrate the absurdity of what he was saying, even if he was saying something that really wasn't that absurd. It really kind of reminded me, I don't know if you remember this, Bernie, that interview that Jonathan Swan did with Trump a while back, where he just, because it became sort of a meme, just, with Swan's sort of the look on his face. And I think it was very effective on Harris's part. It reinforced Trump is weird and extreme, and sort of really kind of piled on to how Trump was presenting himself.
But you're right. And the key question is, what about her? Could voters see her, persuadable voters see her as sitting in the Oval Office? And I think the answer is yes. There were no word salads. Even though I disagreed personally with every policy she put forward, or just about, she said it well. I mean, that's a key point. Even if you disagree with her, she didn't come across as the person Donald Trump had portrayed before the debate, the person who couldn't put two sentences together, the person who wasn't much more, the person who Donald Trump said was stupid, low IQ. No, she didn't come across like that at all. And if you set the bar that low and she came across as somebody you can see as president of the United States, then that's another reason she won and Donald Trump lost. And I think that's the case. I think that she did come across that way. Let me ask you a question, John.
Sure.
Do you think there were really undecided voters going in to the debate at all? Hold on. I mean, or is that something that we were just led to believe? Is that who Trump and Harris were trying to win over? Or was this about Trump trying to win his base over, to make sure not to win them over rather, but to make sure they turned out on election day and early voting, and the same for Harris. In other words, were they trying to persuade, are there voters still out there who are on the fence? And who they are would be really strange to me, to be on the fence at this late date. Or were the two candidates simply trying to make sure their bases went out and voted?
I think there are still persuadable voters who really, not many, I think it's a small percentage, which is why this race is so tight, I think, too. I mean, so a small percentage could make the difference. But I think there are a lot of people, not a lot of people, enough people that don't really pay close attention to politics. They know who Trump is for sure. Maybe not, they don't really understand who Harris is. But I think there is, we talk about this difference in the polls where Harris is leading Trump by this thin margin, while Trump is leading on these issues on the other margin. And I think people are really there are people left who are sort of balancing those two. They say, they think to themselves, those first 3 years anyway of the Trump administration, we had a good economy. There was no inflation. You can get into a whole debate about why there would be inflation now, regardless of who was president. But most people don't see it that way. They just kind of see where they were in their lives, how things were at a certain time. And this person was our president. So yeah, I think there are people. The second part of that question you asked, as far as what Trump is going for, I don't know. I mean, he does some weird things. So he's been changing a lot of his views, not as quickly as Harris has, but pretty quickly, a number of his views to clearly cater to more moderate voters. But he won't. It's funny. He's very selective on that. He'll throw the pro life crowd under the bus to moderate his views on abortion, because he sees that's where most Americans are going to be closer to this position he's moved to. But at the same time, he doesn't. He brought up this point, for example, and I actually wrote a piece on this early yesterday. In recent weeks, Trump had actually been sort of admitting that he lost the 2020 election.
Not really.
In general terms, he was basically saying, he lost by a whisker. It was a close race, but he came up, on the short end. There was a difference in how it was going, and I had asked, I put in my call, and people, that would be great to ask about this to get some clarity on this, and ask him why his message has changed on this a bit. And they did. The moderators actually did, and his answer was to double down on the election being stolen. So he jumped back to his previous position. But that position that the 2020 election is stolen is not a winner with moderates. It's not a winner with persuadables. It might, lift up the spirits of people on his side of the aisle. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a conscious effort where Trump's really only cares about his base, or if that's really the only people he knows how to appeal to effectively.
Well, he said he lost by a whisker 3 different times in 3 different interviews. But last night when he was asked about it, he said, no, it was sarcasm. He can't admit, he cannot say in a declarative sentence, okay, I lost the election in 2020. He is incapable of saying that. Now let me get to another point. And one of our regulars, a very bright guy, sent me a note last night, and he's absolutely right. GOP primary voters picked the one candidate that can't beat Kamala Harris. I mean, think about that. He was, I said at the jump that if you're angry today because you wanted Donald Trump to win, don't be angry at Kamala Harris or the moderators. Be angry at Donald Trump. Be angry at yourself also, because during the primaries, GOP voters had a wide array of choices. They could have voted for Nikki Haley. They could have voted for Ron DeSantis. They could have voted for my favorite, Chris Christie. They could have voted for Doug Burgum. They could have voted for Asa Hutchinson. They could have voted for several other people like whose names I don't recall at the moment. But they picked Donald Trump. They picked the worst candidate they could pick. And you know what? This is for a future discussion. How long is this BS going to last? How long is Donald Trump going to be, the guy who puts fear into the cowards who make up the Republican Party, the politicians who are afraid to say, Donald, you're nuts. You're freaking crazy. Get lost, go home, shut the F up. And they're afraid to do it. And until they do it, Donald Trump is going to be the worst thing that has ever happened to the Republican Party. And if you watched the debate last night, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, they have.
I told you early on, I'm annoyed about this, and I'm going to try to keep my language civil. But I'm annoyed at Donald Trump, and I won't vote for him. And as regulars know, I haven't voted for him, and I have no plans to vote for Kamala Harris either. I am so disgusted with the political system that produces, Democrats who want government to be in your lives every freaking day, and Republicans like Donald Trump who are unhinged, unfocused, and downright nuts. I am convinced, as I said earlier, that this man has a screw loose. Convinced. Okay.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. And it's the, you mentioned that part about, the Democrats wanting this heavy government. It's absolutely right. Today's Republican Party is very statist as well. I mean, it just, you look at how much government was, how much money was spent, added to the debt under Donald Trump. He put, people don't realize this. I mean, they know how much it was close to $8 trillion, but most of it pre-pandemic, he was spending faster during this time of economic prosperity. He was adding more to the debt during this time of economic prosperity for those 3 years than Barack Obama did when he was loading money into the economy after the great recession. So I mean it's just ridiculous. And so there is no small government party. There's not really a free market party. The Republican Party has very much been transformed into this entity to basically just whatever their philosophy is, whatever Trump wants, it's whatever, and that changes, whim. He goes off on different whims, he flirts with different things, and it's just there is no conservative party, there is no small government party, even rhetorically at this point. But Bernie, we brought this up a few times now, the moderators. What did you think of the job they did? One point of to take some interest in. Unlike the CNN moderators last time, these moderators did a fair amount of fact checking, but really only with Trump. Harris made a number of false statements herself, but really didn't receive much, if any, pushback from the moderators.
I'm going to resort to the Wall Street Journal editorial again. The vice president had help from the ABC News moderators who were clearly on her side. They fact-checked only Mr. Trump several times. I think it was 5 times. They fact-checked him and no times for her. So they fact-checked only Mr. Trump several times, though Ms. Harris offered numerous whoppers on Mr. Trump's alleged support for Project 2025, for Mr. Trump's views on in vitro fertilization, and no American troops are in combat zones overseas. The point is that they were on her side, and it showed. It came out. This is what Trump's loyal supporters are going to yell about, but that's not what cost him the debate. What cost him the debate was his lack of preparation, his angry persona, and the fact that he's living in a dark past while she's at least talking about a bright future. It may all be BS on her side, but the BS comes off as better than his dark vision of the past.
I think that's true. I mean, and I agree, moderators were clearly biased. There was bias going on there, and but at the same time, like you said, Trump has had agency to go after Harris. He could have called out some of these things, but time after time, he really just kind of whiffed on it. And I thought it was interesting throughout much of the debate. He fell into this defensive posture. Where he would, Harris would sort of throw in some, dig at him or criticism of him, and he would spend all this time trying to explain himself, and it didn't really make any sense.
He played defense. He played defense the whole night.
Yeah.
What she did was really smart. She would deflect the question, talk about whatever she wanted, and in the last few seconds, goad him into put him on the defensive. It was really a bright, a very smart strategy. Let me read you one more graph from the Wall Street Journal, and then I don't know if we have any more that you want to say, but I want to go through some notes that I scribbled out during the debate last night. And
Okay.
then you can have the last word. Wall Street Journal. Trump also fell into the trap of saying the last election was stolen, that the rioters on January 6th were mistreated, and that the courts had ruled against him in 2020 on a technicality. Does any undecided voter worried about the price of groceries care? That's the point. He's talking about January 6th rioters being mistreated. He's talking about how he really won the election, that he didn't really lose it by a whisker. If you're an undecided voter and you care about inflation, that's what you care about. You don't care about his bullshit. Sorry, I knew I would go over the line at some point. All right, let me just read you just some unrelated notes. Actually, they're not even notes. They're a couple of words unrelated to each other, and then you tell me I'm crazy and we'll end it.
All right.
I wrote this down during the debate. He can't focus. He's incapable of focusing. I think I'm right about that. As for Harris, no word salads. Can independents see her as president? I think the answer is yes. The moderators let her get away with more information than they let Trump get away with. Eating dogs, how stupid can Trump be? I think the whole thing may be over. We'll see about that. Abortion, I've said from 20 whatever the hell it is, that it's a bigger issue than Trump supporters think. They keep saying, well, in the top 10 issues, it doesn't even make, I don't care. It's an important issue and it's going to matter. I really think, I wrote this last night, I really believe Trump has a screw loose. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm confident in what I say. He's crazy. He didn't push Harris. He said Harris wants to take guns away, and she said it's not true. He could have said, what about your mandatory buybacks? What about that? He could have said that. Instead, he just doesn't follow up on anything. And I think Trump may win on issues, but what if personality triumphs over issues? What if the election is not decided on policy, as intelligent people think it should be? What if it's decided on personality? If it is, Trump is a loser and Kamala Harris will be called President Kamala Harris before this is over. I don't know what's going to happen between now and Election Day, so that wasn't a prediction. All I'm saying is if this election is decided on personalities, they both may be unlikable to a lot of voters, but he's unlikable. He's more unlikable than she is at this point. Sorry, that's true. To moderate voters, he's more unlikable than she is.
Right. And I do wonder, I mean, one big question to come out of this is this debate going to matter? I mean, anybody who watched it, I think, unless they're really hardcore Trumpian, is going to recognize that she won, that she handled herself better. She came across as much more stable. But I don't know how many, I don't know how many Americans, especially those who don't typically follow politics that closely, who are a lot of the holdouts at this point, are they going to see it? I assume they'll see, some silly clips online with the cats and everything. And, it's just policy wise, one of the biggest issues that Americans have is inflation, the economy. And Trump, I mean, he couldn't voice anything. He went on about tariffs and made up a bunch of lies about tariffs. He always does this. He always says that other countries pay for the tariffs, and so we'll have this money. No, Americans. It's a tax on Americans. He knows that. I was surprised the moderators didn't call him out on that one, actually. But it's just, it's just a mess. And I thought he actually had a good shot at one point at Harris, trying to get her to sort of better explain her position on abortion, as far as when she would put restrictions in, or when she would prefer restrictions and when she wouldn't. She kind of got out of that. Didn't really answer that. He didn't really hold her to it. He said some interesting things about he wouldn't say whether or not he thought it would be good if Ukraine won the war, which I thought was, I know Ukraine's not as big of a deal to a lot of people. It is to me. I thought that was pretty telling. But I will just say, just to kind of close this out, I thought he did the most effective line of attack that Trump had throughout that whole time. He saved until the very end of the debate during his closing arguments. And that was, he made the point that Harris says she wants all these changes. She complains about what needs to be changed. But, she's been part of the administration for 4 years, and she hasn't done any of these things. And I feel like that was probably the theme that had been drilled into Trump's head by the prep people, to keep coming back to that. I just don't think he ever did. And that's why he went back, when at the very end he got back on script, went into that area. But it was, by then a lot of people had tuned out. Everybody had seen this, this battle. She had pummeled on him for an hour and a half maybe. It wasn't effective at that point.
I don't think content mattered. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't think content mattered. I think what mattered in this day and age of how television works, she looked good, he looked bad. She looked upbeat, he looked angry. I think that's what will count more than any policy. Yes, voters are still going out facing inflation. They still are paying more for the necessities to eat in their homes. Yes, that's absolutely true. And I think that won't matter as much to the undecideds as Donald Trump's angry persona for 90 minutes. I don't think policy is going to matter to them. I just don't. And I'm done. I'm finished talking.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll just add my favorite quote of the evening. Came from Donald Trump. It is, "I've been a leader on fertilization." I thought that was I felt like it didn't make sense, but it cracked me up. I don't know. But before we end this, Bernie, completely switch on one more topic I brought up that I just kind of wanted to cover. This episode is going to air on 9/11, the anniversary of the terrorist attacks on our nation. One question that people are always sort of interested in, they ask of others, where were you on 9/11 when you heard, when you were aware of the Twin Towers being struck? So Bernie, we'll end it this way. Would you like to add some insight on that?
My wife and I were in Miami. We were in a temporary home that we were renting because we sold our house and we were building a new house, which wasn't completed yet. And I turned on the TV that morning and I said, whoa, something's going on here. And I figured at first it was an accident, some small plane. I said, that's not a small plane. I said to my wife, that's not a small plane that crashed into a tower of the World Trade Center. But I thought it was an accident. And then the other one came in. And I called my son, who was out in California. It was very early in the morning out there, and he woke up. And I said, we're under attack. That's what I remember most from that morning, John.
Yeah, I live in a little different time zone. It was still pretty early here in Colorado. I was working as a software developer at the time. We had a TV that was on sort of in the break room, and people were, watching things unfold on the TV. After the first plane had hit, I walked in to get something and was kind of, what's everybody doing here? So they were explaining. At that point, everybody thought it was a sort of a small plane. I turn around, I'm going back to my office, and I hear everybody gasp, everybody shout. I go back in there. They talk about this other plane, that they just saw go through the other building. And I'll be honest, that was, everybody says, after that second plane hit, it was clearly a terrorist attack. I was so disengaged from politics, or just a lot of things at that point in my life. I was much younger. That didn't even occur to me. I was still trying to figure it out. Like, was there some weird air traffic control? I don't get what's going on, And then someone said terrorist attack, and I'm like, wow. And 9/11 really was what got me more interested in actually paying attention to the world, what got me interested in American politics. It's sad that it took such a terrible event for it to happen, but I really started paying much closer attention to that, and that much later led me into what I do now, weigh in on politics and everything. But yeah, it was a horrible day. It's one that will be with many Americans for the rest of their lives. And on this anniversary, just figured we'd recognize it a little bit today, Bernie. So anything else you'd like to say before we finish on up, Bernie?
No, it better keep my mouth shut at this point about the debate.
All right, sounds good. All right, everybody, leave your comments. Let us know how we're doing. And Bernie, you have a great day.
You too, John.